It's a parent's worst nightmare. You love your kids, you raise them well, upper middle class, even wealthy. You send your kids to private school, you nurture them, you love them, and they end up on the street. It actually happened to Emily Wright. You wrote such an amazing article in Toronto Life magazine, which went viral. Tell us the story of what happened.
I grew up in a loving family. My parents gave me everything that I needed in my life, and I went to private school. And through that process, I became the victim of bullying. My classmates would fill my boots with snow and laugh at me as I ran around the playground trying to find them. And I just remember feeling hated and teased and taunted and worthless, really. I didn't feel like I had a place or a purpose. High school sort of rolled around. My parents put me into public school for the first time, and I had a group of friends, and I was so excited. My friends were using drugs, and so I started to use drugs with them as well. And this spiraled into a life of addiction. I became an addict. I became addicted to ecstasy. And at the age of 15, my parents sent me to a rehab center. My first sort of time away from home, my first real experience. I had my 16th birthday there. And I returned home and was able to stay sober off and on here and there. But I basically spent 3 years in about 12 institutions. Eventually I came back to Toronto and tried to learn how to live my life here, where my family is, where my friends were. And I relapsed right away and didn't really have any other options. My parents said, you know, if you're going to use drugs, you're not going to live with us. And it was a choice that I made to say goodbye, and that's when I became homeless. I really had my first experience of what it's like to be hungry and thirsty and not know where you're going to sleep or how you're going to get clothes. And so I lived life on the street for about a year. And with that came learning how to be a sex worker, how to make money on the street as a female. And so that was a life that I became forced into, where somebody said, this is what you're doing now or I'm gonna kill you. And I said, okay, I'm gonna do that. Eventually I met a group of boys who were drug dealers and I sold drugs for them, I worked for them. But with that, they treated me like their sister. They protected me. They kept me under their wing and sort of led me on the streets. And they suggested I enroll in a shelter, and I lived there for a year. And while I was in this program, I started to learn that I did have worth, that I was a worthy person, that I had a purpose, that I could navigate my way in the world. I started to enroll in life skills programs and employment programs. And this way I was able to learn sort of what I wanted to do with my life. And I think for me, that was my purpose. I now have a goal. I now have a plan of action, somewhere I want to go. And early childhood education became that for me.
All I could think about while you're talking is, oh my God, your parents. Oh my God, your parents. What happened? Why couldn't they help you?
I think for me at that time in my life, having a loving family and people who loved me wasn't enough. I wanted a social group. I wanted friends. I wanted to feel like there was something other than, you know, my family that loved me, and I knew they loved me. And so when my friends were using drugs, it was just so easy for me to say, you know, this is my group. This is what I want in my life.
Your parents had to make a very difficult decision because they literally kicked you out of the house.
Tough love is something you have to do for your kids. Tough love exists, and it doesn't make you a bad parent. It doesn't make you love your child any less. In fact, to me, I think it proves that you do love your children, that you're dedicated to them, and that you'll do whatever you have to do in order to get your kids on that path. And so that's the last resort my parents had to take, was tough love.
You're sitting here now talking to me. You're an early childhood educator. You've gone through it. How do your parents feel about you talking about your experience right now?
I think that they are really appreciative that I'm sending my message out and letting people know that, you know, just because you come from a wealthy family doesn't mean you're immune to addiction or immune to homelessness. You know, in grade 9 I was raped, and my parents talked to me about this idea of, you know, you can always talk to me, you can always come with me, but rape in general in the time when I was in school wasn't really something that was discussed. I didn't tell my parents because I didn't know how to. I didn't know if my parents would hate me. I didn't know if they would be ashamed with me. I didn't know if my parents would overreact and I would be in court and pressing charges. I didn't know. And I think for me, it was that idea of being ashamed of what had happened to me and not being able to verbalize it to my parents that sort of started this spiral out of control where I wasn't honest with them. And they did ask me what happened, and I lied about it, saying something else had happened. And if I had maybe taken that chance at that time in my life to say, no, Mom and Dad, this is what's happened to me, I think that would have maybe allowed me to understand. My parents do understand, they do listen, they are there for me, but I didn't give them that opportunity. I really just sort of shut the door out of fear and shame about what people would think about me.
How is it okay that you can talk about it now? How did you come to terms with it?
I think for me, I just realized that it was no longer something to be shameful about, that it had happened, and that I have lived with the consequences of being silent for long enough. I lost my virginity in grade 8, and I did, I don't say I was raped, but I never spoke to the man ever again, and that really gave me that idea of, I'm worthless, and nobody seems to care. Like, this just happened, I was taken advantage of, and nobody cares. And that was something that continued throughout most of my life, is this understanding that why would I tell someone? No one's going to care. Young women need to realize that they are people and they are special, and that losing your virginity to a man that you don't love or care about is something that's going to haunt you for the rest of your life.
I'm going to give you a situation right now. Here's a real one. Someone that I know, 15-year-old girl, was just caught with coke. Obviously her parents are beside themselves. What do you think is going through that little girl's head right now?
I think that she's probably feeling lost. She's probably feeling like she might not have a place in the world. She probably really, really wants that group of friends and the people that she's hanging out with. Because for me, the first time it was, and it took me years to find this out, Erica, but it was, I want to have a place in the world. And using that drug, once I had that drug in me, I started to feel better about myself. I started to realize I had a little bit more self-confidence. I was a little bit easier to speak. I started doing better in school. I started to really realize that, drugs are benefiting me. Now, that didn't last long. I went downhill very quickly. So I think that the parents really need to take a look at why is she using this drug and talk to her about what they can do to help fix that. Maybe that involves going to see somebody separately, an addictions counselor, a social worker, somebody that this person can call their own and talk to and have that life where they know this is so important, where they know the person isn't going to go back and report to their parents. Because that's the other unfortunate thing. When you're underage and your parents are paying for you to go to see a therapist or go somewhere, everything you say to that individual, there is no confidentiality because your parents are paying for it. And so really having a place where she can go where she feels safe, no one's going to repeat what she says. I think that is so important to recovery, to finding yourself, to searching for yourself.
So part of the reason you said you got so connected to drugs was that you have a learning disability and that you felt that it helped you?
The first sort of reaction I had to ecstasy was I started doing well in school. I started getting good grades. I had a little bit more confidence in myself. For this 15-year-old girl that you were talking about, maybe getting her diagnosed, see if she has a learning disability, see if there's ADHD playing a part, or is it just lack of confidence and low self-esteem? Really getting to those root issues is going to help them now instead of figuring this all out in your 20s, which is what I had to do.
Why are you doing this? Why are you bearing your soul and putting yourself out there and telling a story that not a lot of people would be, in quotation marks, proud of?
I think for me, I've realized along the way that my story empowers me. It makes me feel like I'm helping others. It makes me feel like I'm giving back. It makes me feel like maybe I can start conversations and help parents rethink issues that are going on in their lives. I know a lot of my people in my life probably would prefer if I just brushed it under a rug and continued moving forward. But I just can't do that for myself. It's who I am. It's made me who I want to be. And I really think that there's power in sharing a story and having that individualized look at somebody's life and how things have affected them.
Well, I'm so glad you did, and I'm really happy that I'm talking to you today, and I'm going to go home and talk to my son.
I hope you do.
Thank you.